relationship, DNA and RNA. So just as on the individual level, DNA and RNA play a big role, so it does it on the relationship level. And I'm going to talk about some of the parallels and differences in my mind. So you have all these genes that affect a lot of what happens to you in your life, but you also have what's called the epigenome, which controls how your genes are activated or not activated. So it can make a gene more likely to be expressed or less likely to be expressed. It defines a lot of the hot research is actually in epigenomics now, or RNA or mRNA. I'm not a geneticist myself, but, I'm very interested in the topic. And they find that, like, a lot of the keys to aging potentially will be about taking genes and making them more or less expressed, or kind of even repairing genes potentially to, like, an earlier state. Audrey DeGray and David Sinclair are some of the leading experts in the field. So relationships go through the same thing. Like, relationships have a certain characteristic DNA to them, or patterns that are kind of intrinsic to the relationship you have. But there's a lot of circumstances, situations, thinking, group dynamics, third-party variables that can kind of mediate how the relationship plays out. So a relationship might have a certain tendency or even genetic component to it, as it may be, as it were, if you want to think of it in those terms. It's not actual genetics, but kind of a hard wiring to it. But then, if you're going through stress, or if you have like another family member, like a sibling or a parent or an in-law, and how that affects the relationship, and how kids affect the relationship. So there's not just something like the relationship, like there's not just DNA, there's also like all of life and all of how things get expressed. So you might have a tendency towards kindness, or a tendency towards judgment, or a tendency towards anger or whatever, but these get mediated by, what else is going on in your life, how your job is going, and how, you feel about yourself and your self-esteem, and your hobbies, and the time of day it is, and your circadian rhythms, and how much sleep you got, and how much money you have in the bank, and how that affects your thinking. So relationships are hardwired, but they're also mediated, and there's certain aspects of relationship that can become pronounced, or they can become hidden.